value in it unless it was for land in Virginia Beach. So when I walked up, met him, we walked into the house, I talked for 10 minutes about nothing about the property, nothing about the house. I had done my research. I knew where his primary residence was, which was 5 minutes from where I grew up. So I knew him and his daughters grew up in my area. I just started the ball with just going, hey, I hate to tell you this, Mr. Stallings, but you bought this property 3 years before I was born. And I was hoping that I'd break the ice on a good way and you wouldn't look at me wrong, like, are you calling me an old fart? So, so he broke the ice real well. He laughed, he chuckled. And I said, I think you've gotten your money's well worth out of this property. And we just started talking. And after that, he had a military hat on. He was retired military. My dad was retired military. So I started talking about military, started talking about growing up in Green Run and off Rosemont and everything. And then his daughter says, we bought our first house right around the corner from where you live. So for 10, 15 minutes, we went on about nothing about the property. And he finally says, well, do you want to look at the property? I said, sure, I'll take a look at it. So the whole time he was smiling, his daughters were smiling, just had a great conversation. And once I looked around the house, I already knew before I looked around, I just kind of made it look good. I already knew that it was a complete teardown. So I look at it inside and out, and I told Mr. Stallings, I said, look, I hate to tell you this. I said, for one, I usually give an offer right here on the spot. I said, I'm not gonna be able to do that today. I said, two, I am not gonna be able to give you the amount of money that it's worth to you right now. I said, I need 24 hours to talk to a couple builders because I said, I don't deal with teardowns and rebuilds. I said, I work with builders. So I said, if you can give me 24 hours, I said, I'll have an offer for you. And he said, well, that's fine. He said, I got an offer yesterday. He said, I have another appointment tomorrow. So he said, that'll be perfectly fine. He said, what time will you call me? I said, I'll call you by lunchtime. So I called him, I talked to Scott. I told him the whole deal. I said, look, the land value is $83,000. I said, I got a pretty good feeling he wants somewhere around land value, if I had to guess, just from our conversation. So Scott did some research. He gave me a ballpark idea to get it under 100. So I offered him $71,268. And he said, okay. He said, that's not quite close to, he said, it's close, but he said, not quite what the other gentleman offered me. And I said, but I was close. He said, yeah, you were close. And I said, well, how close was I? He said, the other offer was $74,000. And I said, man, $74,000. I said, I'm pretty close. I said, my builder really loves this lot. I said, he really loves it. He loves a building in Virginia Beach. I said, Mr. Stallings, would you, by any chance, give me another 24 hours to let me know, talk to my builder and let him know what he's got to do in order to get this property? And he said, yeah, that's fine. He said, but 74 is not the number I want either. I said, oh, really? I said, what's your number? Do you have a number in mind that you really want? Because you wouldn't tell me when I first met him. And he said, well, he said, I know what the land's worth. He said, I'd really like somewhere around 80 or 81,000. And I said, if I could get you 80 or 81,000, will we have a deal? He said, you get me 80 or 81,000. He said, if your builder will pay that, he said, you call me back. So I called Scott, and Scott said, call him back tonight, tell him your builder's talked to his agent, and his agent has offered to discount their price to give him the price that he wanted. So I waited about 3 hours, and I called him back, and I said, Mr. Stallings, I got great news. I said, talk to my builder. He's talked with his agent. His agent's agreed to discount his price to be able to give a little bit more room to get what you want. I said he can do it at 81,000, and he'll give you your number. And he said if we can do that number right now, we're good to go. And he said, let me talk to my daughters. He said, I appreciate that. He said, let me talk to my daughters. I'll call you back in the morning. I said, okay, that's fine. So he calls me back by noon the next day, and he says, James, he says, did you say 81,000? I said, 81,000 even. He said, and maybe a couple hundred? I said, maybe a couple hundred. I said, but 81,000? I said, is that good? And he said, that's good with me. He said, but the gentleman who was at 74 called me back to check up on the deal, and he said, I told him I was already in agreement with you. And he said, if this helps you out, Mr. Stallings, he said, I can give you 85,000. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. He said, but James, he said, me and you have a deal. He said, I agreed to your number. He said, I don't get the warm and fuzzy about the other gentleman with our conversations. He said, I enjoyed our conversations. He said, I love the way you did business with me and talked to me and my daughters. And he said, that's worth its weight in gold to me. And he said, just so you know, don't tell my daughters that I got offered $85,000. I said, no problem, Mr. Stones, I won't tell them. So, and he said, because I'm not going to tell him. He said, I want to do business with you. I said, absolutely. I said, I'll bring the contract over, sign off on it, and we'll be good to go. And he said, this sounds like a plan. And from there, I took it over. Now, it took almost 7 days for him to give it to his son-in-law and to an agent friend of the son-in-law to review the contract and everything, and started passing hands. And Scott and I started to get a little nervous. But we ended up ratifying it. But he was adamant about he did not get warm and fuzzy about the other gentleman, and he just enjoyed the way I talked with him and felt comfortable.